Hello, Lake County, Florida, and welcome to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. I'm your host, Don Magruder, and you're listening to my 790 AM WLBE in beautiful Leesburg, Florida. Or you could be viewing this today, courtesy of LSTV, Lake Sumter Television, and Appleseed Marketing. Romac Lumber's been a leading provider of building materials in Lake County since 1946, and Romac Lumber is a primary source of information for builders and homeowners. There is no better place to live than right here in Lake County, but every summer, Floridians have learned to keep one eye on the tropic as the prime months for hurricane season are upon us. Hurricane season begins June 1st, and it will last until November 30th. The preliminary forecast by the Colorado State University is for 11 named storms, with 5 becoming hurricanes and 2 attaining major hurricane status. The forecast is down significantly because of cooler than average temperatures in the Atlantic Basin and the likelihood of a moderate El Nino weather pattern. However, I want to make one point, and this is a big point for Floridians. Don't forget about 1992. There were only 6 named storms that entire year, but one of them was a hurricane named Andrew, which devastated South Florida. In other words, Florida is just one storm away from disaster. Today we have a very special guest, and it should be super informative. We are pleased to have as our special guest Mr. Tommy Carpenter, who is the Emergency Management Division Manager for Lake County, and we're going to discuss hurricane preparedness right here in Lake County. Tommy has extensive knowledge and information on how to prepare for hurricanes and other disasters, and today we believe it's a good time to discuss your emergency preparedness. For my part, I unfortunately have a background in surviving hurricanes, as I have ridden out many eyes of hurricanes on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and I've had to deal with the aftermath. So we should have a very informative conversation that can help you prepare for any hurricane emergency. With that, I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Tommy Carpenter, the Emergency Management Division Manager for Lake County. Hello, Tommy. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for the invitation today.
We are so pleased to have you because now is the time for people to start getting their preparations in line. Tommy, tell us about the Lake County Emergency Management Department and what services you guys are providing to the community.
That's a good question. We get that a lot. What do you guys do, especially when it's not hurricane season? And really, we work toward providing the health and welfare of our residents, visitors, folks who work here through planning, training, and exercise. And really, I tell a lot of folks that we're really the umbrella agency in the county, that we work with all stakeholders.
Now, I know today's conversation is primarily going to be focused on hurricanes, but we're one bad weather system coming in from tornadoes that ravaged us like 7 years ago. And heaven forbid if there's a situation like a terrorist attack or a huge chemical spill, those are issues that go under your umbrella also, aren't they?
They are, and really we call it all hazards planning. And hurricane season is so important, but there are so many other things that can happen. Last year, Blue Rhino,
yes,
for example.
And that was a huge event. And quite frankly, as much as people would like to rely on the government, in certain times you have to take some responsibility for your own preparations. And that's a lot of education and training going on in your group, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's our job, is to provide information for education. Everyone has to be responsible for themselves, and they have to take the initiative to be prepared for anything that can happen.
Now, understand that Lake County has an emergency operations center that's really ramped up now, and it's state-of-the-art. And tell us about the emergency center and its capabilities, because I understand it's pretty nifty.
We're very proud of it. It's a 28,000 square foot building, the first floor being the county's 911 center, the second floor being the emergency operations center. Half the funding came from grant funds, and all the technology and furniture that we're using for the building is coming from grant funding. So we're trying to do the best we can to minimize tax dollars to the general fund and maximizing it through grants that actually that other agencies have money they've left over. So we're bringing this money in to provide the technology and the things that our local stakeholders can use to help our citizens.
Now, Tommy, I understand this building is designed to withstand various emergencies. It's equipped with special generators. Take a minute and talk about the actual capabilities of the structure, if you don't mind.
Sure. It's built to FEMA standards, so it's 160 mile an hour wind load. It has redundant utilities. Our generator, when full, can run 3 days the entire building, so it won't interrupt the 911 center, any of the emergency operations that may be going on upstairs. And it's used to house many of the county's different infrastructure between the board and different constitutional officers, so it keeps their information safe in a protected environment to minimize any downtime from a weather event.
Now, I'm making an assumption, but in the case of a real emergency and a state of emergency is enacted, most of the county leaders will rendezvous at the emergency center. Have there been protocols set up for that?
There are, and we have what's called the county's executive policy group. The chairman of the board of county commissioners, the sheriff, county manager, county attorney, the public safety director, superintendent of schools, administrator of the health department all gather, and we make those decisions together. We provide them the information, and then they give us our marching orders, and we make it happen. So we've got them all ready to go.
Now, I'm sure this show is going to create a lot of questions.
Okay.
If someone has a question, how can they contact your office? And why don't you also tell them about your great website where they can get good information?
Okay, our website, if they go to the county's main page, www.lakecountyfl.gov, and then in the keyword space, just type emergency. It takes you right to our website. We have a lot of great information with brochures and preparedness information. Also, they can call our office. It's at 343-9420. And we have an email address, disasterready at lakecountyfl.gov.
And if someone gives you a call, you'll help them individually on some of their preparations if they have a question?
Yes, we'll direct them. If we can't answer it, we will make sure that they're connected with the folks that can.
Can you tell us, there's something I noticed in your literature about the Alert Lake system. I've heard it's a pretty good system, but quite frankly, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I don't understand it. Could you explain what that is?
Alert Lake is Lake County's emergency notification system. So we've used it several times for law enforcement advisories such as missing persons. We've used it for wildfires to notify residents that may be in an area that's infringed with fire coming, and we have first responders going out to evacuate them. And also, too, with tornado warnings, that automatically sends out to the area that the Weather Service says, hey, this area's got a tornado warning coming, and it'll send out a message to them giving them that warning.
Now, Tommy, I've read that under the Alert Lake system that it will take the geographic area of landline phones. But a lot of people don't have landline phones. And didn't I read that you guys will also encompass cell phones if the person allows them to have their phone entered in the Alert Lake system?
Yes. Again, they can go to the county's website, and when they get there, there's an Alert Lake area where they can click on it and they can register. For those folks that don't have internet access or they can't navigate through, then they're welcome to call our office and we'll get them registered.
And what's that number again if they want to call?
343-9420.
Okay, so somehow or another, if you have a cell phone, you can be a part of the system and get these timely updates.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. We're having a wonderful conversation today with Tommy Carpenter. He's the division manager of emergency management here in Lake County, and we're talking about preparations for hurricanes because we are about to enter hurricane season full-fledged. What will happen at the Emergency Operations Center in the event of a major hurricane threat or emergency? What's going to happen?
Well, for a hurricane, we're going to watch it well ahead of time. So we're going to make sure all of our stakeholders, including the executive policy group I described earlier, have all the up-to-date information. And if we're going to be affected severely and have to open shelters, then we want to make sure that we're getting with all the stakeholders that work at the shelters. We want to make sure that our residents that said, hey, if we have to go to a shelter, we need a ride, we want to get those coordinated through our transportation folks. So we're going to get all the preparation done and keep everybody informed and all the stakeholders. We'll also work through our public information officer to get information out to make sure that local media markets, the Orlando market, are all aware of what's going on. And now we're even using social media. We have a Facebook page, Lake County FL Emergency Management, And we have a Twitter page, Lake Emergency, so we'll be making sure that we push information that way. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from folks how the younger folks like the smartphones and they like social media, and we can instantly get that information and then use more traditional ways of getting information through the local media.
And the Facebook page and Twitter page, becoming a fan or joining Twitter or for the system is great, because if you have to leave Lake County or you're out of town, you can keep up with real-time information on Facebook, I'm assuming.
That's a great point. Yes, we can keep information. We'll keep everyone up to date. So the same information that's going out via the media, the radio, TV, we can do with social media.
Just in time for hurricane season, Romac Lumber is giving away free senior-size hurricane maps. The maps are rigid cardstock with a big map of the Atlantic Basin. And I was told by a young person the other day, well, why do you need a hurricane map when you have a smartphone? Well, as our good friends in Mississippi found out during Katrina, cell phone towers get knocked out, cell phone services clogged up, and you sometimes have to go back to old school radio like on WLBE. So imagine if you have a complete blackout, you're listening to WLBE and they're trying to give you coordinates of a hurricane. You may need a senior size hurricane map. But in addition, we have on the back of it the outstanding brochure put together by Lake County on hurricane preparedness, gives you the list of shelters and everything. So the hurricane maps are absolutely free of charge. Come by the studios at WLBE here in Leesburg on Radio Road, or stop at any Romac location in Leesburg, Mount Dora, the Villages, or Ocala, and they'll be happy to give you one free. Never hurts to have too much information out there, does it, Tommy?
Absolutely not. And in this day and age, we have so much information out there that people can access, if it's through Lake County or anywhere, that'll keep them prepared.
Hurricane season begins in May. What emergency preparations should homeowners be undertaken right now before the first threat?
Is their emergency management planning, their disaster plan? What does their disaster supply kit look like? Do they have all the essentials they need? A communications plan. Everyone in the family, do they know who to call if something happens? Where's their point of contact? Have they talked about it? Have they discussed it? And then planning for where they live. Everyone should know where they live and is it safe. If they're in a mobile or manufactured home or a home that's unsafe, then where are they going to shelter? Are they going to go to friends or family in a site-built home, or are they going to go to a county shelter? These are things they should already know ahead of time.
Couple of things during Hurricane Katrina. One of the most frustrating parts of the Hurricane Katrina, even with all the new technology, was the ability to communicate with family members. And it was stressed time and time again. You need to have a family rendezvous person or rendezvous point outside the area. For example, you don't want your rendezvous point to be in Lake County. If Lake County's under the gun, it needs to be in maybe Tallahassee or someplace. How big an issue do you think that is?
It's tremendous. And you mentioned Katrina. I was part of a contingency that went to Mississippi and to after Katrina hit, and it was like stepping back in time 100 years. All communication was just line of sight, and you couldn't talk to people. So it's very important to have that communication plan in place. So if something catastrophic does happen, then everyone in the family understands this is what I need to do if I want to talk to somebody.
Now I know the possibility of coastal flooding it's not going to happen unless something of a biblical nature happens here, which we sure don't want that to happen. But if you are on the coast and you happen to see this, the worst thing in Katrina was when they had the flood, and everything that got touched by floodwaters had to be disposed of. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of people had hurricane kits, but unfortunately they were allowed to get part of the flood and they were rendered useless. That's something you have to think about when you're securing your supplies, isn't it? It
is. And what I've a great idea that I saw from one of my friends actually was using one of those suitcases with wheels.
Yep.
That has the handle on it. Take it with you. Or if you use one of the large clear tubs, make sure it has wheels so you can pick it up and take it with you. And I tell a lot of folks, make it part of your daily routine or weekly routine where you can rotate stock through it and you're using it. But it's just so important to have it.
What are some of the essentials you think someone in Lake County should have in their emergency kit right now?
Water. You need a gallon of water per person per day. And I tell people, and you see different things. Some people say, well, I've seen 3 days, I've seen 5 days. I'll tell them 5 to 7 days you need to have that. Non-perishable food, have a manual can opener. The manual can opener is something that a lot of people forget about. A Noaa weather radio, battery-operated Noaa weather radio, so you know what's going on. Battery-operated flashlight. If you have children or seniors that live, make sure you have those essentials with you if they're in your house. Pets, make sure you're prepared for pets. Any toiletries that you may need, or some simple things to think about that you should have ready to go in the event that you have to leave, or that civilization kind of stops. No power, roadways are impassable, that you've got supplies to live.
And you know, one thing people forget about, not only do you need water to drink, but you should fill up bathtubs, and you should fill up any place you can with water, because you have to have water to flush toilets and sanitation. Water is your key element, isn't it?
It certainly, especially for people with wells. And I lived in a house that has a well, and you got to have that extra water ready to go if you want to flush toilets and think about how to live those days till the power comes back on. So water is absolutely key for anything we do.
And you know, another thing that came up during Katrina that a lot of people don't think about, and unfortunately it's gotten worse, is cash. Because in a true emergency, whether it's a hurricane, tornado, whatever, you may be without power a couple of days. That debit card will be rendered useless.
That's correct. And that's a tough thing to do, where you try to keep your own stash of cash that's there if you have to get up and leave and not want to take from it. But that's absolutely right. If there's no power and you're relying on a debit or credit card, there's no money.
And of course, you also have the issue about fuel in the tanks and fuel in the grill and all that. It's a lot of things to think about. But we're having a great conversation with Tommy Carpenter from the Lake County Emergency Management Division. We've got a lot more to discuss, so please stay tuned. See you in a minute. Welcome back to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. I'm your host, Don Magruder, and we're having a very informative conversation with Tommy Carpenter. He's the Emergency Management Division Manager for Lake County, and we're talking about hurricane preparedness. Big topic in Lake County. We live right in the middle of the state of Florida, and hurricanes have crisscrossed this area many, many times. So it's a good time of the year to discuss this. You know, we're talking about the various things to prepare for prior to hurricane threat. Couple of things to remember, Tommy, is medicine. That's a big, big deal, isn't it?
Prescription medication, absolutely. 2006, Florida legislature passed a law that allows folks to get medication if it's not time for a refill. So, for instance, if Florida is put into a hurricane warning, or if the county declares a local state of emergency, you can go to your pharmacist and get a refill that'll get you through the period of time so you're not without medication. But a lot of folks forget it.
And that's one thing about it. Most hurricanes are so big, once the state of Florida has a hurricane watch or warning and it goes to that level, I understand a lot of things are enacted, like prices cannot be artificially increased and those things, correct?
That's correct. And a lot of times fuel seems to be the one that pops up the most, where people are getting gouged because prices have gone sky high. So when that local state of emergency is declared, or the governor's declared that, written the executive order to get ready for it, then a lot of folks are really under the gun not to do those kind of things.
And you know, Tommy, the other thing that people are so frustrated during hurricane threats or aftermath is they'll pull that generator or chainsaw out, and it's sitting there with that gasoline that has 10% ethanol, and it will not start. Now it's probably a good time before the hurricane to have that generator and that chainsaw service, just in case you need it. And if you're going to use fuel in them, use the type that's pure fuel, correct?
It is. Check it. Make sure those carburetors aren't gummed up, and if they take care of the fuel, get the right type of additive for the chainsaw or for your generator. Make sure that you know what you're supposed to put in there. But absolutely, this is the time to start them up. And if they don't work, then get them fixed and get them ready to go. You
know, essentially what you're saying, Tommy, is you need to have a detailed checklist of what you're going to do in your kit, what you're going to do, and all the things you need to prepare before the storm strikes. Is that something you guys recommend, that each family develops a emergency checklist of these items?
Absolutely. That's another great part of preparedness. There are many checklists out there. The county, on our site, we offer one. But the nice part about them is you can customize them. So if you have those mechanical devices that you can build in there that they need to be checked, or you need to run them so often, or have some, Uncle Bob come look at it because he's the guy that takes care of it, make sure you're making that communication. But it addresses everything from your food to your home to communication on just how you're going to operate during a time of disaster.
Right now, Tommy, what's your biggest concern in regards to hurricanes threatening Lake County and in regards to emergency management? What gives you the greatest pause?
I have to say it's amnesia. A lot of folks don't realize the last hurricane that went through Lake County was in 1960, Hurricane Donna. Mm-hmm. So folks that were here through 2004, we got a lot of wind and rain. There was never any empirical evidence that we had hurricane-sustained winds, and we had a lot of damage, a lot of debris. So, and talking with some folks, well, we're not going to get that. It won't hit Florida. It's been too long. And that's what bothers me the most, because they're just that we don't really need to be as prepared or really think about what's going on until it's too late. And then within 48 hours, everybody's just, oh my goodness, what have we done? I've got to get ready. I'm not ready. Where do I go? Where do I get this? And that's really not the time to be thinking about that. It's too late.
In 2012, October 2012, Hurricane Sandy opened a lot of eyes. It's a devastating hurricane that went up the Northeast, and at the time, people were caught grossly ill-prepared. A lot of it had to do, they didn't even know where the home insurance policies were, didn't have any kits or anything. How do you look as far as that type of preparedness and that type of event? Do you think people have learned lessons, or are you concerned that this amnesia has sort of become a malaise again?
I hate to say this, but I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't think they have. I think it didn't affect us. And I think that while Hurricane Sandy was horrible, I think 900 miles across and just affected so much of the United States, that here in Lake County, we haven't had that weather type event in a long time. And that really does bother me. People really should think about, and it goes back to all hazards preparedness. Think about Blue Rhino. Think about Summer Bay Resort last August, where people had to pick up and run. And it's that type of preparedness that if they can get that type of preparedness, then it's good for anything. It's good for the sinkholes. It's good for hurricanes. It's good for a natural or man-made disaster. So I really like folks to just think about that. Don't think about hurricane season. Think about all year round. And if you can do that, you've got a good edge on anything that comes.
And then you have to keep in the back of your mind, we're so close to Orlando. You're close to a huge metro market that could pose some threats on its own, couldn't it?
It could. A lot of the transportation hub that comes to Lake County, or our economy. How much do we depend on those that come from Orlando, that work here, that do business with Lake County? That's concerning too.
Now, on the back of the senior size hurricane map is a brochure you created that specifically for Lake County. It's outstanding information. And by the way, if you want your senior size copy of the hurricane map, you can pick one up here at WLBE or any Romac lumber location in Leesburg, Mount Dora, the Villages, or Ocala. But these brochures and this information is available to people online right now. And won't you talk about a minute about your online resources and how they can get this? Because, they're listening or seeing this program today, and they need this information now to make decisions.
We do. We have a complete line of brochures available on our website, and it addresses all type of weather issues, tornadoes, hurricanes, thunderstorms, heat. We have a lot of residents that live here seasonally, and the heat is an issue. Last year they said 2012 was the hottest year on record.
Wow.
So that's an issue. We have a brochure that addresses pets, how to take care of your pets, sheltering, what you could take to a shelter. And one of my favorite is the Noaa weather radio, having that, understanding it, how to program it, and how to use it. They're all available online at our website. Again, if you just go to the county's main page, www.lakecountyfl.gov. Keyword emergency takes you right to our site, and then the link's on the left, and we have great information there.
Part of your information on site and part of this hurricane map is the predetermined shelters just in case there's a hurricane threat. Can you tell our listeners where they're located? And of course, they're online, but basically, what are the main shelters here in Lake County?
We do. We have 9 shelters. They're all elementary schools. And let me just run down the list here. We have Astatula Elementary School in Astatula, Leesburg Elementary in Leesburg, Lost Lake Elementary in Johns Lake Road in Claremont, Mascot Elementary in Mascot, Round Lake Elementary in Mount Dora, Spring Creek Elementary in Paisley, Treadway Elementary in Leesburg, Umatilla Elementary in Umatilla, and the Villages Elementary in Lady Lake. Of those, we have 3 special needs shelters, which is Umatilla Elementary, Leesburg, and Lost Lake Elementary. Now, our pet shelters coincide with our special needs shelters, so if you have a pet that you need to take with you, and we strongly encourage it, Umatilla Elementary, Leesburg Elementary, or Lost Lake Elementary.
Outstanding points, because there's a lot of people will not go to a shelter and leave their pets behind. But now I understand the pets are put someplace differently than the owner, correct?
That is correct. They're kept in usually a building away from where people shelter, and that's for safety reasons. But our Animal Services Division and volunteers do a great job. They put the pets in a safe place. Owners are allowed to go see their pets, feed their pets, walk them, if they let them do their business when it's safe. And then when the bad weather comes, everything and everybody's locked down, get through the weather, and then owners can go back and get their pets.
And let's talk about something that's very important. When you go to a shelter, you have to bring your own supplies.
You do.
That's a big problem they had in Mississippi Gulf Coast. I know in New Orleans during Katrina, people showed up at shelters with nothing in hand. But a shelter is just a shelter. But you're technically supposed to bring your own bedding, your own food, your own water, because there's no way possible they can provide all that, correct?
That's correct. One of the things we really heavily stress is if you don't have a safe place to stay, find family or friends in a site-built home. You're going to be far more comfortable there. And a shelter is safe, but it's communal living at its best. You have to bring your sleeping bag, pillow, whatever blankets you want. You need to bring your own snacks, bring books, toys, battery-operated radio or flashlight, something that for yourself. And let me reemphasize snacks. That was a big thing in 2004. Everybody gets hungry. Bring what you like if you have special dietary issues. But you really have to bring your own stuff to be self-sustaining until the weather's clear and you can get out.
You're listening to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. We're having a great conversation today with Tommy Carpenter. He's the Emergency Management Division Manager for Lake County, getting a lot of information in case we're threatened by a hurricane. And Tommy, the other thing about these shelters is I understand you have Lake County Sheriff's officers that will be there to handle security, but there's no foolishness allowed at these. No drugs, no alcohol, no guns. You have to be completely, I guess, better short, nonviolent.
You have to be there for the sole purpose of sheltering. It's not a place for folks to prey on anybody else, to take advantage of them. The sheriff's office is there, and they do a wonderful job of making sure that everybody's there, everybody's safe, and can get through the weather. And then when it's time to go, everybody leaves, and they do a great job.
And the other thing, if you bring your pet to one of the pet shelters, and won't you list those pet shelters again? Because that's a big deal for a lot of our senior citizens here in the area.
It is, and there are Umatilla Elementary, Leesburg Elementary, and Lost Lake Elementary.
But if you bring a pet, you still have to bring its food and water and any of its special needs, don't you?
You do. There's a checklist for that, and that's another good checklist to have is one for your pets. You've got to bring them in a carrier. If it's a pet that requires a leash, bring a leash, food, water, litter box. The veterinary records, make sure that they've been vaccinated for rabies, anything, any bedding, any toys, anything that would make them comfortable, because they're going to be uncomfortable too riding out a hurricane in a strange place in a crate that's dark. So bring what you can that makes them comfortable, and bring some kind of carrier to put it all in. And those are the kind of things folks may want to think about when they're sheltering their pets.
And once again, it's real important people to understand the pet will be sheltered away from other people because of safety issues.
Absolutely. But the pets will be safe.
And that's very important. So there's no reason for someone to stay in a mobile home or a flimsy structure during a hurricane. Their pet will be safe, and they will be safe if they come to one of these shelters. Let's talk a little bit about the various types of evacuations. You know, this is a big controversial issue in hurricanes. evacuating and what type of evacuations. Can you give us some clarity on that, Tommy?
I will. In my 22 years in public safety in Lake County, we've never had a mandatory evacuation. And typically the type that we see are when wildfires are going to threaten a home. And public safety folks are knocking, sheriff, firefighters are knocking on the door saying you have to leave, and they leave. I really don't know of any other time that we would really need a mandatory evacuation. Being an inland county, what we're going to do is if we have a hurricane is get to a safe place.
Can I ask you a question, though?
Sure.
If you're told it's a mandatory evacuation, they still cannot make you leave your home, can they?
I don't think so, no. And that's always been an issue. But again, it's going to have to be something bad, almost the term you use, biblical, to require a mandatory evacuation. It's just never happened in Lake County. But when it has, you need to leave. Folks have always been compliant because there's a good reason.
And one thing, if you're once again going to be in the coastal area, I know during Hurricane Katrina, when it happened and people were asked to evacuate and they didn't, there's nothing they can do for you because they can't put first responders, they can't send them out in 6 foot of water.
Absolutely not. First responders will be safe. There's a limit that they have. And typically for a hurricane, that's when winds become greater than 35 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour sustained. Once that happens, first responders are sheltering until the weather's safe, and then they'll come back out. So in that time, you're on your own.
Plus, there's another thing to remember. Lake County, for example, if there's a threat in South Florida, Lake County plays a major role in evacuations and also sheltering people from South Lake County, I understand, don't they?
We are. Lake County would be what's called a host shelter. Mm-hmm. So the list of shelters I just read more than likely would not be used because we want school in session. So we're going to use a different list of shelters, churches, and other places that we can host those folks to come up and keep them sheltered until it's safe to go back home or we can find temporary housing.
Tommy, can you discuss the basic evacuation routes here in Lake County if someone needed to go?
Typically, they're the main arterial roads. Again, for an evacuation in Lake County, if we had to evacuate, it's going to be something horrible. But think of any of your main arteries, US 27, 441, State Road 44 that runs east-west. Those main arteries are going to be your evacuation route out.
And those roads will be cleared. And I guess the other thing about evacuations, and you've alluded to this several times, because we are inland, Lake County, unless it's something of a biblical nature, you're probably better staying here than getting on 75 or some road, getting trapped in a car with a landfalling hurricane.
I agree. If you go to a coastal community, you'll see the evacuation signs, and they show you the evacuation route out. We don't have that in Lake County. This is where people come. But again, when you're here, it's important to know where you are and if the structure that you're in is safe or not. And if it's not, get to that friend, family. If you have an issue with them, make sure you have a safe place to go. And at last resort, if you need a county shelter, then we've got it for you.
Tommy, isn't the main threat here in Lake County to a landfalling hurricane tornadoes?
It can be. A direct hit, I mean, you're talking about severe wind, rain, but what we've seen in the last several years, and especially in 2004, are those outer bands. And one thing that I really like to stress to folks is when you watch your favorite news outlet and you see this little black dot, and that's what the forecaster uses to say this is the path. Well, hurricanes are several hundred miles across.
Right.
And then you've got those outer bands with thunderstorms, severe wind, and they spawn tornadoes. So when people see that little black dot go away, they think, oh, wow, it's okay. And they're not really preparing for what could really happen.
Well, we've had a great discussion thus far with Tommy Carpenter. He's the Division Management Manager for Emergency Management here in Lake County. We've got a lot more to discuss to get everybody prepared for hurricane season. We're going to take a break now. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Around the House, sponsored by Romac Lumber. We're in our final segment, and we've been discussing hurricane and emergency preparedness with Tommy Carpenter, the Emergency Management Division Manager for Lake County. And Tommy, you've got a lot of great information on your website real quick, once again, if people need more information, what's the website address?
Go to the county's main page, www.lakecountyfl.gov. Type in the keyword emergency, and it takes you right to our site.
Another big deal during a landfall and hurricane for Lake County is going to be flooding, and not coastal flooding that we know from surge, but just like Pensacola had earlier this year. They had like 22 inches of rain at one time, and that created dramatic biblical flooding. Now, let's put the word biblical in there. That could happen here, couldn't it?
It sure could. And what folks have to remember, and this is another thing, our ground has a lot of capacity. If you look at our lakes, it has a lot of capacity. We can take water, but if you take 22 inches in 24 hours like Pensacola did, it's going to create flash flooding. It's going to create bad driving situations. It's going to create intrusion into homes. It's just bad news all the way around, and folks need to think about that. We're in Florida, and that could happen.
Tommy, a lot of our senior citizens, during a hurricane threat, you look at the ratings of CNN and Fox and those places, this skyrocket. And those media outlets have a propensity of making everything life and death. And while you have to take emergencies very serious, and I'm not wanting to discount that, there are situations in which people take it to the extremes. A lot of our senior citizens here question when they should evacuate and when should they stay. There's going to be senior citizens who may be faced with that. What would you tell them? When should they consider evacuating? Considering some of these folks may be by themselves or they're with a disabled spouse. How do you calm those fears?
First and foremost, call our office. Let's talk to them. Let's do some one-on-one communication, and then we can provide them educational material. But that's, again, finding your favorite local media or news outlet, and then we're going to let everybody know this is what the county's doing. This is when we're opening shelters. If they need a ride to a shelter, then we can work on providing that transportation to them. If they have questions about pets, medication, anything to allay their fears and answer their questions.
So if a senior citizen was here and they were in a good house and they called your office and said, hey, we're hearing all this news, we're frightened, you will have someone talk to them and say, hey, you should be okay or whatever. I know you can't make guarantees on everything, but what number should they call?
Our office number is 343-9420, or if they want to email us, disasterready@lakecountyfl.gov.
Let's talk a little bit about the aftermath, and that's, unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize more. I sometimes think more people are killed and injured after the storm than they are before, because there's a lot of people doing things that they're not used to. Do you find that's the case?
It is. You have power outages, you have blocked roads, you have food that's spoiling, and people fire up those generators. Typically, the generators used most to keep the refrigerator going. If generators aren't properly ventilated, or if you're not familiar with its use or the use of fuels, it can be deadly. 2004, we had several folks that died from carbon monoxide poisoning because they didn't set their generator in the right place. One thing that I've learned in 2004 during the hurricanes going to Pensacola after Ivan was that one of the number one hazards for the first couple of days afterwards was snake bites. So people have to remember critters. They're displaced too, and we have a lot of reptiles in Florida, and people should be on the lookout. Wearing the right clothing, hard-soled shoes, long pants, shirts that cover your arms, and just be prepared. Down power lines. If you're not familiar with how to use a chainsaw, don't let this be the first time to try to figure one out and how to use it. So people in the aftermath think, okay, the weather's gone, now we have to get things fixed. But if they're not really understanding how to do those things, they can be hurt.
Well, now after a hurricane is not the time to wear flip-flops.
No. I have daughters, and I have to constantly remind them you need hard-soled shoes, because if something happens, you can't wear the cute flip-flops. You have to really think about what you're doing.
And a lot of people don't realize in flooding situations, another problem and is ants. Mm-hmm. The ants will come up and they'll float, and the fire ants can be deadly.
They look for high ground, and that's just one of the other things that folks don't think about. It doesn't happen very often, but people should be prepared for anything that can crawl and invade your home.
The other issue is a lot of spoiled food, and the worst thing you can do is, unfortunately, is have a power outage. You're hot. Your food is spoiled. You eat something bad, and now you've got food poisoning. that could really be deadly, couldn't it?
It could, and what I really stress is, on the health department's website, if you have perishable food that's been in a refrigerator longer than 4 hours, throw it out. Don't even take that chance. Remember, you've got your disaster supply kit. Have that non-perishable food with can openers. For freezers, they've also said they've got literature that indicates that if you have a full freezer and you don't open the door, you can keep your food good for 48 hours.
And that's the important part. You cannot open the door to your freezer. The other thing is, and this is a little trick they did, I've seen many times in other areas, is they thaw things out and cook it before the storm gets there. And they have some you can cook up some meals and preserve it a little bit that way.
You can. A lot of hunters in Florida, and they've got freezers full of meat. This is a good time to cook it and share it with your neighbors. It may not be what they planned, but don't let it go to waste. Have some meals prepared for when the storm comes.
You know, the biggest thing I see with a lot of our seniors, though, they won't take their medications. They'll just take a day with them. You really should load up all your bottles and everything with you, shouldn't you?
You should. And really, what I would recommend for anybody that's got medications or take any medications is have a list of what it is, how many times a day you take it, what's the dose, have it ready to go. Because, again, it's often one of those things that aren't thought about. Take that to your pharmacist. If we're in that situation where Florida's in that hurricane warning, or if we've declared a local state of emergency, either one, they can get a refill in their prescription and have them during the time when maybe that pharmacy's not open.
But if you leave it at your home, that's the problem.
It is. It doesn't do you any good.
Now, these special needs shelters, you have 3 special needs shelters here in Lake County. Where are they again?
Umatilla Elementary, Lost Lake Elementary, and Leesburg Elementary.
Now, are they able to accommodate people who have COPD problems and need oxygen? Can they bring their tanks and stuff down for that? Or define what special needs is. I guess I need a definition on that.
Locally, for special needs, what it is, we have folks typically are the ones that are electrically dependent. They need some type of oxygen. They need some type of device that requires electricity. So there's a screening process where someone who has an issue like that completes an application. It goes to the health department, and they review it for medical necessity. And then we provide them the information, and often they'll work with their oxygen providers to see what they need to bring in order to be comfortable at a special needs shelter.
So someone with COPD that's using an oxygen machine, we have a lot of seniors like that. But now, you told me something I wasn't aware of. You really need to do that prior to the storm. You need to fill that application out and get that information to the health department. Say that one more time so everyone's clear on that, Tommy.
It does. Anybody that's electrically dependent, that uses a device that requires electricity, such as an oxygen concentrator, they need to get with our office or get with the health department, get that special needs application, get it completed. Let's get it to the health department, let them review it for medical necessity. When they put their stamp of approval on it and they send it back to us, then we provide them the information of the closest shelter to them where they can go and the items they need to bring, and then have them work with their their oxygen supply company and figure out what's going to work best for them.
You know, the other thing that a lot of people don't think about, and it's sort of important, identification. And if you have a homeowner's policy, have that on you, because you're going to need that, aren't you?
You are, and I'm a big proponent in Go Kits, meaning have all your important documents, identification, cash, somewhere where you can pick up and go. And when we have bad weather, a hurricane that comes, we have a little bit of time to prepare. But again, I have to reiterate all hazards planning. Think about those folks at Summer Bay Resort that had mere minutes to pick up and go. That, to me, is the essence of a Go Kit, where you can pick it up, take it with you, and go.
Well, for example, like we had in 2007 when we had the bad tornadoes hit Lake County, there was a couple of streets that the tornadoes really devastated there. Well, people were not allowed in that didn't have identifications identifying them that they lived or needed to be on there, and law enforcement wouldn't let you have it. So it's really critical in these times of emergencies to have your identification on your person, isn't it?
It is. You have to be able to prove that's where you live or that you belong there. And if you don't have it, law enforcement won't let you in.
You know, one thing we haven't talked about in the aftermath of hurricane is knowing where that water came from that you're drinking. That could be as deadly a thing, drinking contaminated water. What I mean, help me out, Tommy. Even here in Lake County, if we have a power disruption or a hurricane event, it may not be a major one. You could knock out water facilities where the water might have to be boiled. Am I correct?
That is correct. Believe it or not, Lake County has 602 water facilities, and the majority of those are private. The rest are government. But there's a lot of places that produce water in this county, and folks need to be prepared. If there's a boil water, understand how to boil it. You can use chlorinated, unscented bleach, about 8 drops per gallon. That'll help to disinfect it.
What type of bleach?
Unscented, chlorinated.
Just bleach you buy it?
Bleach you buy at the store. Just none of the fancy scent.
And you put 8 drops for 1 gallon, and you mix it up, and that will sanitize water?
It will.
That's a good tip I did not know. So, but water's a big deal, and once again, it goes back to having enough water to sustain your family. And you recommend 3 to 5 days, right?
I recommend 5 to 7. And again, you'll read different literature, but I've just from experience, if we get something that affects the entire area or the entire state, help is going to get there as quick as it can, but people still need to be able to be self-sustaining, and water is important to everything we do.
The other thing that you need to have in your garage or your shed is emergency repair items for your house. For example, if you lost a roof or you lost a window, it's going to be hard to get some of those supplies, isn't it?
It is. Tarps, you can never go wrong with tarps, and tools that don't require power. Have them ready to go. The old-fashioned saw, hammer, nails, everything that you can use manually. Have it in a safe place and ready to go, and think about what you may need to repair in the event of a storm.
Realistically, though, Tommy, in today's world, and we've alluded to various type of emergencies. As a family or a person, you have to be prepared for basically being cut off 5 to 7 days. If today something bad happened, can you and your family sustain itself for the next 5 to 7 days without the help of the government? And that requires a lot, doesn't it?
It does. This takes effort. There's nothing easy to it. It takes communication. It takes planning. It takes diligence to do the things and get the things that you need, and then get to where you understand the process and you live it.
What non-hurricane emergency concerns you the most?
I think it's probably the things that we don't know, the things we don't think about. And I've said them before: the blue rhino, the sinkhole. Those are things that we couldn't plan for. They just happened. We're getting a lot of special events in the county, and that's one of the things our office does is we work with all the public stakeholders for these large events that come to Lake County that bring a lot of business. Bike Fest, Mount Dora's got the Craft Fair and Arts Festival, and our office works with all those stakeholders to create the plan and do the pre-planning to make sure that we don't have issues that like happened in Boston last year. Mm-hmm. We had Bike Fest right after that, and we want to make sure we do all the pre-planning to prevent that. So a lot of folks don't see it, but there's a lot of work that goes in to make sure that events are safe, people are safe, and visitors are safe.
And, probably half the airplanes going to Orlando, which is one of the busiest airports in the world, go right over to Lake County. And who's to say an unfortunate airplane crash could happen? And you've got to handle that, don't you?
It absolutely does. And the airport here in Leesburg, it's an international airport. We don't have the same large aircraft, but anything that can happen at any time.
Tommy, could you summarize what people need to have in their household right now in case of a hurricane or emergency, for hurricane or emergency threat right now?
Right now, go back to your emergency plan, and that consists of your disaster supply kit, that food and water for 5 to 7 days, those necessary items to provide you information and provide your day-to-day survival. That communications plan, which is so important, that everybody in the family knows how to communicate, that you can do it without smartphones.
And the other thing, a lot of people are relying on smartphones and they don't know real numbers. Write the real phone number of your contact information.
Absolutely. Have that in your plan. Write down in your communications plan all the numbers of everybody you want to speak to, and have everyone in the family have that contact information.
And then we need to go through these shelters one more time, because that's going to be a big deal for a lot of people, and identify the special needs and pets.
Okay. All the shelters in Lake County are elementary schools. So we'll have Astatula Elementary, Leesburg Elementary, Lost Lake Elementary in Claremont, Mascot Elementary, Round Lake Elementary in Mount Dora, Spring Creek Elementary in Paisley, Treadway Elementary in Leesburg, Umatilla Elementary, and then the Villages Elementary in Lady Lake. Now, of those, we have 3 special needs shelters, and the special needs and pets are all in the same shelter, and that's Umatilla Elementary, Leesburg Elementary, and Lost Lake.
And if someone is going to go to a shelter, what should they bring with them?
They need blankets, sleeping bag, things that they can sleep with, food, snacks, anything to keep their time occupied, books, any toys, weather or battery operated Noaa weather radio or flashlight.
And one other thing, most shelters are non-smoking, correct?
That's absolutely right. No smoking, tobacco free.
We'd like to thank Mr. Tommy Carpenter for being our guest today. He's obviously doing a great job here in Lake County getting us ready for the emergencies, and let's hope we don't have to get the emergency center going to this year, but if we do, I know we're prepared.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Please join us next week on Around the House, and be sure to come by any Romac location or WLBE for your senior size hurricane out. Until next week, we'll see you then.